Hi, good morning. I'm Kenny Hubble with Bev & Co. and welcome to Breakfast with Bev. I get to talk to you about the statistics this morning, and Bev and Cheryl and Marla and Dan and Alan always say, Kenny, it's your turn to talk about statistics because you're the statistics guy. And I have to admit, I am always willing to be able to talk about statistics, meaning that supply and demand, because my background is from a grocery store background. My grandparents and my parents both owned a grocery store as I was growing up until I was the age of 15. And a little bonus points to anybody that can answer during this session with Breakfast with Bev this morning if you can name the grocery store that was. Let's see if I have any fans out there. So supply and demand has been part of my life ever since I was a little kid. And I've always had a passion for it, and that's how I actually got into real estate back 25 years ago. And so I want to talk a little bit this morning about what the marketplace is doing. How's the market? Well, it's always depending on about your property, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a second. But I do want to talk about how's the first 3 quarters of 2020 looking as far as the numbers are concerned. And I always like to be able to talk about 3 different ways. So it's like the supply and demand. We have active properties that currently are for sale in the marketplace. And so what that does, it helps us track whenever we're talking to you about your home, about what the inventory is, what's your competition, how many properties are we up against. So that's the active supply. And if we look at the current active supply in all of Columbia's MLS, which incorporates basically Boone County, Callaway, Cole, Randolph, Howard. And so it's the entire, 50-mile radius around Columbia makes up our multiple listing service property of inventory. So about 509, well, there's 519 as of this morning, active properties for sale. So if I narrow that down to a specific price range, it'll go down to 100 or 20 or 15. And so we look at that on a weekly basis for our clients. But overall marketplace, up through this morning, 519 in the MLS. Now, if we look at Columbia only, there's 285 active properties for sale. And how does that compare to what has been in the past? That is a very low number for this time of year. Normally, we're looking at around 400 to 500 properties for sale just in Columbia, or 800 to 900 in the entire MLS, the entire surrounding community. So supply is down as far as active properties are concerned, but that really doesn't matter unless you're ready to sell your house. But what we do now look is, if you are ready to sell your house, active supply, we kind of look at that, what's your competition. Then we look at pending properties that have went under contract in the last 45 days. That provides us information about the demand. How many buyers have been out there and actually purchased something, have something under contract, they went out with their realtor and found a house and put a contract on it and waiting to close. That time period between under contract, when they found their house, and when they're actually able to close on it, is about a 30 to 45 day natural time period. So what we say is basically in the last 45 days, there's been 541 buyers in the marketplace in all of surrounding area. So again, kind of 519 active for sale, 549 have went under contract in the last 45 days. So if you look at supply as far as months of inventory, that tells us that we have less than a 2-month supply of inventory on the marketplace currently as far as the properties are concerned. We have 339 active properties under contract that are currently waiting for a closing date as of this time in Columbia. So 541 in all of our MLS and 339 just in the Columbia School District. Once a property closes, once that buyer and seller actually are able to disperse funds and transfer the deed, that becomes a closed property, and we're able to use that number and sales price as valuation for the house. So that gives us value. So we have supply, we have demand, and then we have value. So we look at closed properties to be able to say, what can we sell your house for? So yeah, Kenny just told me there's less than 2 months supply of property on the market. But what does that mean for my house? Well, that all depends because we're going to have to look back and try to find 3 to 4 properties that are like kind properties to yours to see what they've been selling for. I want to give you a good idea. We're going on an appointment later this afternoon to be able to talk to a client, a past client of ours, and they bought the house back in 2005. Back in 2005, they purchased the house for $175,000. If we look at historic, as far as when this house was built back in 1995, the house was purchased originally new for $126,000. So it's actually sold 3 times. So it sold new for $126,000, and then 7 years later, it sold for $150,000. So in 7-year time period, the value went from up $25,000. Pretty good return on your money as far as if that you had that property and you kept it for 7 years, you were able to make some money from it. So now if we go from 2002 to 2005, the next time it sold just 3 years later, it went up $25,000 again. And so during that time period, that 2002 to 2005 range, for those that have been in the marketplace and realize what happened during that time period, that's when we had a really big boom in Columbia. The values were just going skyrocket because we had so much demand in the marketplace that it made the prices go way up. So back to my active, which is your supply, demand, pending properties, how many buyers in the marketplace. Back then, we couldn't build houses fast enough because we had so much demand for properties. It was raising the prices of existing homes. The same thing has been happening over the last 4 years. So for example, our valuation from 2005, when this house last sold at $175,000 is what it closed for, to today, my valuation on this property is $260,000. So not quite $85,000 worth of equity over the last 15 years. So that's a big jump. And it's doubled its value since it was built back in 1995. So everything's relative. That's a specific property. That's a snapshot of the entire marketplace about active, pending, and closed. What's happening with the supply and demand, and what's the valuations. The valuations always dictate about your specific property. For example, as your property went up $75,000 over the last 5 years, maybe not. But we don't know unless you're, actually ready to be able to find out your valuation. And if so, give us a call here at Bev & Co. We'd be glad to help you as far as being able to determine your actual valuation for the property. So until next time, whenever they ask me to come back and talk about supply and demand, or as we talk about interest rates, for example, or whatever we want to be able to do, if you have a topic that you'd like for us to discuss and bring up and be able to educate you and us on as far as that's concerned, feel free to be able to chime in on this as well. We'll be glad to take any suggestions that you have to be able to provide some value. So until next time, I'm Kenny Hubble with Bev & Co. Thanks for joining us.